Just because many of us love Grand Seiko watches doesn't mean that they're perfect. Despite references like the White Birch being core, best selling models within the lineup, Grand Seiko has done something I wish more brands would do: take some of the best models in its arsenal and try to make them even better. Did Grand Seiko succeed here? Let's get into it. Around 2 months ago, Grand Seiko somewhat quietly revealed a substantial Evolution 9 lineup refresh. 9 new references, only one of which marks a completely new color for a Lake Suwa dial, the SLGB007 with a Moonlit black dial. At first glance, the uninitiated could easily look at before and after renders and not necessarily catch the subtle updates. But to Grand Seiko fans and collectors, the tweaks stand to have serious appeal. First, let's establish what references we actually have in hand for this presentation. We have 3 of the updated 40mm high beat watches with the new SLGH029 Night Birch, SLGH031 White Birch, and SLGH035 Genbi Valley. On the spring drive end of the equation, we were able to get hands on with the SLGB011 Atera Blue and the new Lake Suwa 40mm and 37mm variants with the SLGB013 and SLGB015. So, what are these tweaks? Well, the dimensions of the cases, whether in the 40mm size or 37mm size, haven't really changed. Nor has the Evolution 9 geometry changed, still boasting the most alternating light and shadow, brushed and distortion-free mirror polished zaratsu-finished surfaces of any of the brand's case geometries. However, any reference that was previously crafted in just stainless steel has been upgraded to Grand Seiko's Ever Brilliant steel, which, in short, is a steel alloy that has nearly twice the corrosion resistance of standard steel and a brighter luster as well. Joining these new Ever Brilliant steel models are also high-intensity titanium models. The second and final overall design update is the most important and something many Grand Seiko fans have been asking, begging the brand to do: bringing the redesigned bracelet that debuted on the 37mm SLGB003 Ice Forest to the 40mm size and to both Ever Brilliant steel and high-intensity titanium watches. Not only are all of these models now equipped with Grand Seiko's new micro adjust clasp, but they also have bracelets with a more classic taper, 22mm down to 18mm instead of 20mm. And in case you were wondering, the 37mm bracelet tapers down from 21mm to 17mm. For the segment of watches driven by a high beat movement, they continue to utilize the in-house high beat 9SA5 caliber. This groundbreaking movement made waves when it launched in 2020, an 80-hour high beat caliber with a dual impulse escapement and a caliber architecture with an elevated aesthetic due to diamond cut bridges and their shape inspired by the profile of Mount Iwate and the curving bends of the Shizukuishi River, both of which are nearby Studio Shizukuishi, where the watches are actually made. I've been to the manufacturer, and I'm not kidding when I say you could be sitting at the bench, looking out the window, and Mount Iwate is just staring you right in the face. It's absolutely stunning. So look, no changes on this front, but not a bad thing considering it is a beautiful and high-performing movement, the most advanced within the brand's high beat arsenal. The spring drive models are where we see an important, potentially contentious switch in regard to the movement. All of the updated spring drive models now use the new 9RB2 movement in place of the previous 9RA2. The good news is that this means people who wanted a UFA spring drive movement in a 40mm case now have that option. It's Grand Seiko's most accurate spring-driven movement, notably around 6 times more accurate than the 9RA2, with its pledged regulation of plus or minus 20 seconds per year. Yes, per year, compared to the 9RA2's plus or minus 10 seconds per month. So, Zach, why would anyone complain about that? Well, the 9RA2 boasted a very impressive 5-day power reserve, while the 9RB2 delivers Grand Seiko's standard 3 days of power reserve. While I'm personally happy either way, both excellent calibers, some could argue that the increased accuracy has a very marginal effect in the wear experience compared to an extra 2 days of power reserve. I mean, this is a difference between a watch running for half the business week versus the full business week. But these are watches that I suspect most people would be wearing pretty frequently. So then again, maybe it doesn't really matter all that much. But look, for the spec sticklers out there, the new 40 millimeter Atera Blue is now 11.7 millimeters thick instead of 11.8 millimeters thick as a result of this switch to the 9RB2. With all that in mind, are you happy to have Grand Seiko's most precise spring driven movement, or would you have rather kept the 5 days of power reserve? Let me know in the comments. Okay, we've touched on the cases, bracelets, movements. Now let's look at the dials. For the high beat models, the green birch, along with the night and white birch models we actually have here in hand, are exactly the same as they were before. The birch pattern still involves a deeper stamp than the spring drive birch models born out of the Shinshu watch studio. The colors are the same as their predecessors, and they still have the same Evolution 9 handset, applied hour indices, and date layout. Nothing to really fix, as they were all already fan favorite expressions before. The biggest dial news within the high beat segment is the return of the Genbi Valley inspired dial pattern, seen previously on the SLGH021. But before anyone cries foul, the hue of the dial on this new non-limited SLGH035 is not the same as the 1,000-piece limited edition SLGH021. Whereas the SLGH021 was a light green, the SLGH035 is a light blue-green that's more blue in expression. It also doesn't have a gold tone applied GS logo or clasp medallion like the SLGH021. And I actually prefer this. The uniformity of white metal all around is more to my personal taste. And just to cover all of my bases, out of the 4 high beat models, only the night birch is cased in high intensity titanium. The remainder are executed in ever brilliant steel. For the spring drive segment of this refresh, 3 utilize Grand Seiko's lauded Lake Suwa pattern. As I said before, the SLGB007 Moonlit Lake Suwa is an entirely new color expression for the dial pattern, evoking a scene of moonlight hitting the waters of Lake Suwa with its dusky dynamic black hue. Of the 5 spring drive models within the 9 model refresh, it is the only one presented in high intensity titanium. In terms of the new Lake Suwa models that we actually have in hand, at first glance you might think the dials are no different from before, but upon closer inspection, you will realize that the blue dial is a subtly lighter shade of blue than what was previously used. This new lighter blue Lake Suwa execution is the only one within the refresh to be presented in both a 37mm and 40mm size. The 37mm SLGB015 is 11.4 millimeters thick and 44.3 millimeters lug to lug, while the 40mm SLGB013 is 11.7 millimeters thick and 47.9 millimeters lug to lug. Both are quite wearable lug to lug measurements, but 44.3 is definitely a more classic presence on the wrist, more vintage adjacent. Beyond Lake Suwa dials black or blue, you also have the updated SLGB009 Spring Drive White Birch and the updated SLGB011 Atera Blue. What makes this updated Atera Blue model very intriguing, perhaps the most intriguing of the bunch, is not just the updated tapered bracelet with micro adjust or the 9RB2 movement pivot. The original SLGA025 Atera Blue was cased in high intensity titanium, but this new SLGB011 utilizes ever brilliant steel. This means anyone who liked the previous Atera Blue model but wished it was in heftier steel than lightweight titanium now has that option. Okay, I know many of you are probably wondering, oh great Zach, all these updates, but what is it going to cost me? How much more expensive are these new references compared to the previous ones? Well, to give you an idea of what to expect, for the Night Birch, its retail price of $11,400 is $900 more than the previous SLGH017. The White Birch, despite making the jump from steel to ever brilliant steel, along with the updated bracelet and clasp, makes a smaller jump of $400 to $10,200. However, there's some good news in this. The SLGB011 Atera Blue, in its pivot from the 9RA2 to the 9RB2, and from high intensity titanium to ever brilliant steel, is actually $800 less than the original SLGA025 at $10,200. To be clear though, the previous versions of these new references have yet to be officially discontinued, though that may happen once existing stock is depleted. Ultimately, this is an excellent move by Grand Seiko, and one, as I said at the beginning, I wish more brands would make. I'll always welcome true novelties from brands. It's always exciting to see genuinely new products and designs. But in a world where the default is for brands to introduce new dial variants, rather than refine existing ones, I really appreciate that Grand Seiko sought to make its best designs even better. The tapered bracelet and micro adjust clasp were a long-standing request from its consumer base, and this refresh reflects Grand Seiko's persistent pursuit of the utmost precision and bringing the best wear experience it can to your wrists. Of all the models within the refresh, which is your favorite? Let me know down in the comments. Mine is probably the Atera Blue, but what would really seal the deal for me is if they also made it in a 37mm size. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Okay. All of the presented watches are available now for pre-order, with the Birch style models available beginning October 2026, and the Lake Suwa and Atera Blue dial models available beginning September 2026. For full pricing and specifications, you can check out the description below. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the Time+Tide channel for all the latest watch news, reviews, and content. And as always, see you on the next one.